I've never told this story before, not on Reddit, not even to my closest friends. For a long time I kept it buried because it still haunts me, the look in her eyes, the way the house felt that summer, how everything slowly spiraled into a quiet nightmare. But after what happened last week, I realized that secrets don't protect anyone. They just rot in the dark. So here goes. It all started the week my grandma moved in with us. She was old, sure, 82 at the time, but sharp. Her hair was still dark except for a bold white streak that made her look a bit like a witch from a fairy tale. She smelled like lavender soap and always carried little hard candies in her sweater pockets. Kind no one really liked, but she gave them to you anyway with a crinkly wink. First, everything seemed fine. She smiled a lot. She helped around the house. She always woke up early and watched the birds on the porch with her tea. But things changed. Slowly. Then fast. My mom, technically my stepmom, but she raised me, started locking the fridge. You read that right. She put a padlock on the actual fridge. I thought it was a joke at first. Some weird experiment or diet thing. But no. It was to keep Grandma out. She eats too much, Mom said once, coldly, as if Grandma were a stray cat. She has no self-control. But Grandma was thin. I'd even say frail. I never once saw her eat more than a bowl of oatmeal and some toast in the morning. Sometimes she'd skip dinner altogether. She said she wasn't hungry. I didn't believe her. But I also didn't know what to do. I remember the first time I heard Grandma crying. It was late, somewhere around 2 a.m. The hallway was dark, the air still and thick. The kind of night where everything feels like it's holding its breath. I was on my way to the kitchen for a glass of water when I passed her door and heard it. Not loud sobs, not the kind you hear in movies, just quiet, broken sniffles like someone trying very hard not to be heard. I froze. I wanted to knock. Ask her if she was okay. But I was a coward. I told myself maybe she had a nightmare. Maybe I just imagined it. So I went to the kitchen. But the fridge was still locked. And there was a dirty plate on the counter with only crumbs left on it, probably my stepmom's late-night snack. Felt wrong. All of it. The next morning, Grandma was at the table like always, wrapped in her soft pink cardigan, hands around a mug of tea. Her eyes were red. Didn't sleep well? I asked, trying to sound casual. She smiled at me like she always did. Just a little tired, sweetheart. That's all. But her voice cracked. Later that day, something else happened. I overheard a fight. It wasn't yelling. My stepmom didn't yell, she hissed. Like a snake. I was walking down the hall to the laundry room when I heard her whispering furiously behind the kitchen door. You gave it to who? What the hell, Eleanor? That money was supposed to come to me. You can't just, listen to me, I know what I'm doing. You're old, you don't know how bills work anymore. I stopped in my tracks. I already gave the social worker your new mailing address, and from now on your checks come here. You don't need to touch them. A pause. Then, if you try to be clever about this again, I'll make sure you get moved to a facility. Is that what you want? A facility? She said it like a threat. Like prison. I felt sick. That night, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. My grandma got social welfare, about $1,000 a month. Not much, but it was hers. Money she had earned over a lifetime of cleaning houses, ironing shirts for rich people, living on rice and beans just to get by. And now it was just gone? Controlled? Stolen? The next week, everything got worse. Mom got bolder. She stopped pretending. She didn't bother hiding the way she talked down to Grandma anymore. If you're not going to eat what I cook, then don't eat at all. This is my house, and you're lucky I let you stay here. You want your precious check? Go earn it. Made me furious. But every time I tried to say something, she'd cut me off. Stay out of it. This is adult business. I was 16. Not quite a child. Not quite old enough to do anything either. So I did the only thing I could think of. I started sneaking food to Grandma. Piece of toast here. A banana in her cardigan pocket. One night, a whole bowl of soup smuggled under my hoodie. She never said anything. Just gave me that soft look. The kind that made my chest hurt. And then something really strange happened. I was in the living room looking for batteries when I found the envelope. It was thick, sealed, hidden behind the books on the bottom shelf. It had Grandma's name on it. I opened it. Inside were 3 letters, official-looking, and a stack of money. Cash. Hundreds of dollars. The letters were from the social services office. They were unopened. All of them had the same phrase at the bottom. Please contact our office regarding your change of address. She never saw them. My stepmom had hidden them. My hands were shaking as I stuffed everything back into the envelope. My brain went into overdrive. How long had this been going on? How much money was she stealing? What else had she kept from her? That night, I slipped the envelope under Grandma's pillow without a word. The next morning, everything changed. The morning after I returned the envelope to Grandma, she didn't come to breakfast. That in itself was unusual. She was always the first one up, always sitting there with her tea, watching the morning birds. But that day, the chair was empty. I found her in the backyard. She was just standing there under the big walnut tree, looking up at the sky. Her cardigan was too thin for the chilly air, and her shoes were soaked from the dew in the grass. "Grandma?" I asked. She turned and smiled, but something was different. Something in her eyes had changed. Not soft. Not tired. Focused. Sharp. "Morning, sweetheart," she said. "Lovely day, isn't it?" I nodded, and we didn't talk about the envelope. Not that day. Not for a week. But from that moment on, everything shifted. She stopped trying to be small. She sat straighter. Felt clearer. She even started brushing her hair more carefully, putting on little touches of pink lipstick like she used to when I was a kid. And most importantly, she started writing. Every night at the dining room table after dinner, she'd pull out a notepad and write in tiny, cramped script, flipping page after page. When my stepmom walked by, she'd cover the pad with her hand. When I asked what she was writing, she just said, "I'm remembering." Gave me goosebumps. Then came the phone call. I was home alone when it rang, one of those old landlines we barely used anymore. I let it go to voicemail. But the machine picked up and I heard the message as it recorded. "Hello, this is Jasmine Peterson from the Department of Adult Services. I'm calling regarding the ongoing file on Eleanor Thompson's benefits, as well as her living arrangement with Ms. Caldwell. We've received the recent documentation and wanted to confirm an appointment time." I froze. Documentation? Appointment? What the hell was happening? Just as the message finished, the front door opened, and in walked my stepmom. I panicked. Hit the button to delete the message before she heard. She didn't even notice. She was on her phone, yelling at someone about a delayed refund. But my heart was racing. What was Grandma planning? That night, I asked her, "What are you doing?" I whispered as I sat on the floor by her chair. "Who did you call?" She looked at me carefully. Then she reached into her cardigan pocket and handed me a folded napkin. It had a list of names, agencies, numbers, all in her tiny handwriting. She tapped the paper with her finger. "I used your old phone. The prepaid one you left in your drawer." My stomach flipped. I'd forgotten all about that phone. I'd used it last year when I was grounded and still wanted to sneak in texts. Used my phone? "I needed one she couldn't track," she said softly. "Just in case. Just in case." My 82-year-old grandmother was running a counterintelligence operation from our dining room. I almost laughed. Almost. A few days later, things got tense. Really tense. My stepmom must have sensed something. Maybe she noticed Grandma wasn't as passive anymore. Maybe she saw her talking on the porch or caught a glimpse of the letter she was mailing. 'Cause suddenly, she snapped. One night at dinner, out of nowhere, she slammed her fork down and shouted, "What are you doing all day, Eleanor?" "Huh? Making calls? Stirring up trouble?" The whole table went silent. Grandma didn't flinch. "I'm preparing," she said, voice calm. "For what?" my stepmom barked. Grandma looked her dead in the eye. "To leave." I swear the air in the room disappeared. My stepmom turned red. Then white. Then red again. She stood up so fast her chair toppled over behind her. "You think you can just fine. Go. Go live in a nursing home, see how you like it. But Grandma smiled. I won't be going to a home, she said. Not the kind you're thinking. And then she stood up and walked out of the room like a queen leaving court. I sat there in complete silence. My stepmom looked at me and hissed, You did this. You and your little hero complex. But I didn't respond. 'Cause in that moment I realized something important. She was scared. For the first time ever, my stepmom was scared of my grandmother. And she should be. 3 days after that dinner, Grandma disappeared. No note. No warning. Just gone. Her room was neat. Bed made. Cardigan folded on the chair. Her slippers by the door. I came home from school and saw her things untouched, and instantly felt that something was off. The air was wrong. Still. Too still. I called for her. Nothing. I checked the porch. The backyard. The laundry room. Gone. I found my stepmom in the kitchen, texting furiously. Where's Grandma? I asked. She didn't look up. Out. Out where? She shrugged. I don't know. The park? Maybe she finally wandered off. Wouldn't be a shock. My blood ran cold. You're not worried? She's old. Maybe she got confused. It happens. No. It didn't. Not like this. Grandma never just left. I grabbed my phone and started calling every number on that napkin she gave me. One by one. Agencies. Hotlines. Shelters. No one had heard from her. Then I called the last number. The one at the bottom. A woman answered. Calm. Professional. Thank you for calling Safe Steps for Seniors. How may I help you? I asked if Eleanor Thompson had checked in. A pause. Who's calling? I'm her grandson. Another pause. Then she's safe. She's requested confidentiality, but I can assure you she's being cared for and that legal procedures have been initiated. Legal procedures? I echoed. Yes. Based on the documentation and recordings she submitted. Recordings? I looked up toward the ceiling. My grandma had been recording her conversations. That night, my stepmom went ballistic. She tore through Grandma's room like a tornado, ripped drawers out of the dresser, pinned every envelope, dumped the trash. Where is it? Where is the damn recorder? She screamed. I just stood in the doorway. She's not coming back, I said quietly. My stepmom spun on me, red in the face. What did you do? I didn't do anything, I said. She did. She finally did. And then, for the first time, I saw panic behind her anger. She knew. She knew something was coming. 2 days later, the first letter arrived. Certified. With a state seal. It was addressed to Ms. Janice Caldwell, my stepmother. She opened it, her hands trembling. It was from Adult Protective Services. A formal investigation had been opened. Accusations included financial abuse, neglect, threats of institutionalization, coercive control. There it was, in black and white. My stepmom sank into the chair like the floor had disappeared beneath her. She read the letter 3 times, then threw it across the room. She's lying, she spat. She's a senile, manipulative old woman. But the words sounded hollow now, desperate. And that's when I finally said it. You locked the fridge. She froze. What? You locked the fridge, I repeated. You starved her. You stole from her. You treated her like trash. And now? You're scared because she's not senile. She's smarter than you. She slapped me. Hard. Right across the face. But I didn't flinch. I just looked at her. And I smiled. 'Cause I knew this was the beginning of the end. That weekend, Grandma sent me a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A handwritten letter, sealed with a pressed flower inside like she used to do when I was a kid. My sweet boy. I'm safe now. I'm in a place where people listen, where dignity still means something. I'm sorry I had to go without saying goodbye, but you needed protection too. Everything is in motion. The fridge is unlocked now, in every way. Love always. Grandma. Cried when I read it. But not just because I missed her. I cried because she was free. And because for the first time I felt proud of her. She hadn't just survived. She fought back. They showed up on a Tuesday. 2 of them. A man and a woman. Both wearing badges and serious expressions. Not cops, but close. The kind of presence that makes people sit straighter. They knocked on the door just after 10 a.m. My stepmom answered in her bathrobe, half asleep, still smelling like wine from the night before. "Janice Caldwell," the woman asked. She blinked. "Yeah, we're with Adult Protective Services. May we come in?" She tried to act confused. "Wait, what's this about?" But the man had a folder. He opened it. "We're here about Eleanor Thompson. You've been notified of the investigation, but as of today, this is a formal house visit. We're conducting a health and safety assessment of the home and requesting a sworn statement regarding the accusations." Accusations. There was that word again. My stepmom looked like she was about to faint. I stood at the top of the stairs, heart pounding. Watching. Listening. Waiting. They walked through the house. Took photos. Questions. They looked at the lock marks still on the fridge. They asked about the checkbook in the drawer which had Grandma's name on it, but was signed by Janice. They even asked about the security camera Grandma had supposedly asked to have removed. I didn't even know about the camera. Apparently, it was pointed at the living room, installed under the pretense of keeping an eye on Grandma in case she fell. But it had no footage of her ever falling. Just long hours of her being ignored. Dismissed. Silenced. And then they asked me to talk. I told them everything. The padlock. The food. The crying. The threats. I showed them the envelope I'd found. Crumpled receipts. The letters Grandma never opened. I told them what she whispered to me that night on the porch. "I'm remembering." The woman from APS nodded. She wrote down everything. And then she said something I'll never forget. "Thank you. You just helped save her life." That afternoon, a second knock came. This time it was a courier. A plain manila envelope was handed to my stepmom. Inside, an official cease and desist order. She wasn't allowed to contact Grandma. Not in person. Not by phone. Not through me. A lawyer had filed it on Grandma's behalf. My stepmom lost it. She can't do this. She doesn't even have money for a lawyer. But she was wrong. Grandma did have money. Her money. And now she had access to it again. In the following days, the house went cold. My stepmom barely spoke. She wandered from room to room like a ghost, sometimes stopping in the kitchen to stare at the unlocked fridge. One night, I found her crying in the laundry room. Not guilt. Not sorrow. Fear. She wasn't mourning. She was realizing. She'd lost control. And there was no getting it back. Then the letter came. Not from Grandma this time. From a law firm. They were helping Eleanor Thompson file for restitution. They were also recommending her for an independent living program that allowed seniors to live in shared housing with support, dignity, and autonomy. Rent paid, food covered, staff on call, but no locks. No stealing. No abuse. She wasn't going to a home. She was going to her home. A new one. Chosen by her. And just like that, my stepmom became very small. 4 years she had played queen of this house, controlling every light switch, every plate, every locked fridge shelf. Now she was barely a shadow. One morning I walked into the kitchen and saw her eating dry cereal from the box, barefoot, eyes blank. She looked up at me, and for the first time ever, she didn't look angry. She looked beaten. "Where did she go?" she asked softly. I shrugged. "I don't know the address. I just know she's okay." She nodded slowly. And then she said something I never thought I'd hear from her. She won. It had been 21 days since I last saw her. 3 weeks of silence, letters, and legal noise. 3 weeks of watching the woman who once ruled our home with bitterness unravel like wet tissue paper. 3 weeks of wondering if Grandma would ever want to see me again. Then came the call. It was simple. Short. "Hi, sweetheart." If you're free on Sunday, I'd love to have tea with you. I'm in a new place. There's a garden. I cried the second I heard her voice. Not loudly, not with sobs. Just silent tears that rolled down without permission. Tea in the garden. It sounded like something from a children's book. But to me, it was the most powerful sentence I'd ever heard. Sunday came like a dream. I wore my best shirt. I brushed my hair 3 times. I brought a small bouquet from the grocery store, sunflowers, because she once said they made her feel tall inside. Place was modest. A converted colonial house with a wraparound porch, soft beige walls, and a little brass sign at the gate. Riverhaven Independent Living. There were wind chimes, lavender bushes, a cat sleeping on the windowsill. It smelled like freedom. A kind-faced woman at the desk showed me the way through the side yard. She's waiting in the back garden, she smiled. And there she was, sitting at a wrought iron table beneath a trellis of ivy. Pink cardigan, white hair loose around her shoulders, a china teacup in one hand, a small notebook in the other. She looked alive. Not younger, not stronger, but real, full, like a soul restored. When she saw me, she didn't stand. She just opened her arms. I ran into them, and for a moment we said nothing. Because what can you say when you've come through fire together? When the smoke clears, all that's left is breath. We drank tea, chamomile, with honey. There were cookies, real ones, not the stale ones from the back of the pantry she used to hide from my stepmom. She told me about her room, the book club, her new friend Gloria, who used to be a jazz singer. She told me how the staff cook with herbs from the garden, how she'd started writing again. Writing what? I asked. She smiled. My story, she said. Not the one they told about me. The true one. That hit me harder than any slap ever could. Eventually, I asked her the question I'd been afraid of. Are you happy? She didn't answer at first, just looked at the tea swirling in her cup. Then she said, I'm becoming. Becoming what? Someone I forgot I was. I wanted to stay forever, but time moved like it always does. When it was time to go, she held my hand tight. Take care of yourself, she said. And never forget, you're the reason I had the strength to remember who I was. I nodded, throat tight. I didn't do much, I whispered. You did everything, she said. Then she slipped something into my hand. A folded page, torn from her notebook. Never let small people lock your fridge. Eleanor T. We both laughed. It wasn't just a joke. It was a lesson. And maybe a promise. It started with a letter. Again. But this one didn't come by mail. Came by process server, a man in a suit who knocked on our door at 8:12 a.m. and said in a flat tone, Are you Janice Caldwell? You've been served. Inside the envelope, a civil lawsuit. Eleanor Thompson versus Janice Caldwell. Charges. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Emotional abuse. Coercion and unlawful control. Theft over $5,000. There were photos, transcripts, bank statements, and worse, audio recordings. Clear as day. You want your precious check? Go earn it. You'll end up in a home, alone. You don't deserve anything. Sentence poisonous. Played back to her now like knives on repeat. My stepmom fell to her knees in the kitchen, clutching the table like the floor had vanished. I didn't mean it, she said aloud to no one. I was stressed. She made me feel crazy. But no one answered. 'Cause no one was on her side anymore. Especially not the law. 2 weeks later, I was with Grandma again, helping her organize some old photo albums when she pulled out an envelope of her own. She looked at me with a small, quiet smile. Want to see something fun? I nodded. She handed me the papers. Her new will. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was this. She didn't cut Janice out. I blinked. Wait, you're still leaving her something? She nodded. Why? I asked, completely stunned. After everything she did to you? Grandma sipped her tea, calm as ever. Because what I'm giving her, she said softly, is exactly what she can't handle. She pointed at a line in the will. To Janice Caldwell, I leave $1. And a copy of this document. So she knows she was remembered and still found unworthy. I sat there, stunned. That was it. $1. And a permanent legal written statement. I saw you. I didn't forget. But you still get nothing of value. It was cruel in the most elegant way. Not vengeance. Not violence. Just a declaration of power written in ink and law. But that wasn't the end. Not yet. A week before the court date, my stepmom did something I didn't expect. She showed up at Riverhaven. Uninvited. I was there, visiting Grandma again. We were playing cards. The staff stopped Janice at the front door, but Grandma told them to let her through. I wanted to protest, but Grandma put a hand on mine. No. Let her in. She walked in like a ghost. No makeup, no jewelry, clothes hanging on her like they didn't belong to her body anymore. Her eyes were red. And for once, not with anger. With shame. She stood there, trembling. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was scared. I felt like I was losing control of everything. You moved in and I saw your checks and I thought I deserved more. I thought you didn't matter anymore. Grandma didn't interrupt. She just waited. Janice finally said, You destroyed me. Grandma nodded, calm. No, she said. You did that. Then she did something so shocking I nearly dropped the deck of cards in my hand. She stood up, walked to Janice, and hugged her. Not with love, with mercy, with finality. And then she whispered, loud enough for me to hear, I forgive you, but you'll carry this longer than I ever did. Janice collapsed into sobs, and Grandma turned away. Conversation was over. Forever. After Janice left Riverhaven that day, Grandma didn't talk about it. Not a word. Not over dinner. Not during our usual Tuesday crossword. Not even when I brought it up, cautiously. She simply smiled and said, The past knows where to find me if it needs to. That was her way of saying, it's over. But it wasn't really. 'Cause what happened next surprised even me. I came by on a Thursday afternoon, bringing her a box of chamomile tea and some peanut brittle, her guilty pleasure. When I got to her room, she wasn't there. She's in the writing room, the receptionist said. The what? She pointed down a hallway. Sure enough, at the end of the corridor was a door with a hand-painted sign. The writing room. Stories left untold. Inside was a cozy little library with soft lamps, vintage armchairs, shelves of books, and, in the corner, a beautiful old manual typewriter. And sitting at that typewriter, hunched slightly, glasses on the tip of her nose, was Grandma. Typing. Click. Clack. Click. Ding. I stood there quietly, watching her. She didn't notice me at first. Her hands were surprisingly fast. Decades of ironing, folding, scrubbing must have trained those fingers well. When she saw me, she didn't stop typing, just smiled and kept going. Give me 10 minutes, she said. This chapter's loud and wants out. I sat in the window seat, stunned. My story, she told me weeks ago. She was really writing it. 20 minutes later, she pulled the page from the machine and handed it to me. It was titled, How to Survive a Locked Fridge, a memoir by Eleanor T. I laughed. But when I started reading, I got quiet. 'Cause it wasn't just a memoir. It was devastatingly honest. Raw. Clear. Elegant. She described everything. The cold tea mornings, the hunger, the shame, the anger she swallowed because she didn't want to rock the boat. And then the turn. How she remembered her power. How she took it back. At the bottom of the page, in her shaky but deliberate handwriting, was this. You don't escape abuse by waiting for kindness. You escape it by daring to believe you deserve better. She wrote every day after that. Sometimes for hours. Sometimes just a paragraph. Some of the other residents started gathering around her during writing time, reading over her shoulder, asking questions. Soon they started bringing their own notebooks. One woman began writing about her years as a midwife in Mississippi. Another man started recording his memories of growing up during wartime. Spread like a spark catching dry leaves. What began as Grandma's private therapy became a kind of movement in Riverhaven. She called it the Unlocked Voices Project. 2 weeks later, the staff helped her set up a small reading event in the garden. There were fairy lights in the trees, tea and lemonade on folding tables. Dozens of people gathered around, including family members, volunteers, and even a local reporter. And Grandma? She sat in front of a microphone with her manuscript in hand and read out loud. I was 82 when I remembered I was not invisible. I was 82 when I stopped asking permission to exist. And I was 82 when I found the lock on the fridge wasn't just a lock. It was a symbol. And I broke it. The crowd didn't cheer. They rose. Every single one. That night, as we sat in the garden under string lights, she turned to me and said something I'll never forget. You know what the most rebellious thing is at my age? I shook my head. Being heard, she said. Then she smiled at me sideways. But we're just getting started. The interview aired on a Friday afternoon. I was in the school library when it played. Local public radio. Quiet, thoughtful segment hosted by a woman named Claire Denton. I remember her calm, steady voice. Today, we speak to Eleanor Thompson, 82, who recently launched a grassroots storytelling project for seniors called Unlocked Voices. But before that, she lived through something no one should. This is her story. And then, Grandma's voice. Clear. Steady. Full of grace. She told the whole thing. From the first time the fridge was locked, to the final day in court. She didn't name Janice, but it didn't matter. The message was unmistakable. Silence keeps you hungry. Telling the truth feeds your soul. I sat there in a plastic chair, listening with goosebumps up my arms. By the time it ended, the librarian was crying softly at her desk. The story spread faster than anyone expected. First, the local paper printed a feature called The Woman Who Unlocked More Than a Fridge. Then it got picked up by a statewide news outlet. Then came online blogs, elder advocacy groups, and even a TEDx organizer who reached out asking if she'd consider speaking. It was unreal. Everywhere she went, people thanked her, hugged her, cried. Some told her, "You reminded me of my grandmother." Others whispered, "You told my story." She never took credit, never played the victim. She just said, "All I did was open the door." But not everyone was happy. About 2 weeks after the radio broadcast, something strange happened. Riverhaven had an open community event, tea, live music, lawn chairs under the sycamore trees. I was there helping set up the chairs when I noticed a man standing in the back. Tall, graying beard, dark sunglasses. He didn't belong. He wasn't part of any staff. Not from the community. He didn't clap. Didn't smile. Just stood there. Watching. Staring. Grandma. After the event, I asked her if she noticed. "I saw him," she said, like it was nothing. "Do you know him?" She hesitated. Then finally, "Yes, but not anymore." "Who is he?" She looked me in the eye. "He was my son." My stomach dropped. Janice's husband. My stepfather. The man who walked out when I was 11 and never came back. The one who left Grandma with us, claiming he'd come back once he got settled. He never did. And now, here he was, in the back of the crowd, watching the woman he abandoned become a quiet revolution. I felt heat rise in my chest. "He doesn't get to come back now," I said. But Grandma just smiled. "He's not back. He's just looking." The next day, he showed up again. This time at the front desk. He asked if he could speak to Eleanor Thompson. Said he wanted to make amends. The staff said no. She'd already signed a restricted contact list. Only immediate family approved by her, and I was the only name on it. He left without protest. But later that day, Grandma told me something that shook me. "I've already forgiven him. Long ago." I stared at her. "Why?" "He left you. Left me. Let Janice treat you like garbage." She took a long breath. Then said the hardest thing I ever had to hear. "Because he was broken. And broken people break others. But I'm not broken anymore. So I won't keep the chain going." She didn't want to see him, didn't want to reopen the wound. But she didn't carry him with her anymore either. That was the difference. He was still stuck in the past. She'd already moved forward. And then, something beautiful happened. One of the volunteers at Riverhaven, a young woman named Kara, approached Grandma after another reading. She was in her 20s, bright-eyed, with a nervous sort of energy. I listened to your interview, she said. And I'm starting a podcast, kind of a community oral history project. Would you be my first guest? Grandma looked surprised, then honored, then amused. I've never been on a podcast before, she said. You'd be amazing, Kara said. People need to hear your voice. More of it. Grandma nodded. All right, she smiled. But only if I get to choose the tea. The episode aired 2 weeks later. It opened with her laughter. Not the polite kind, but full, deep, contagious joy. She spoke about hope, about shame, about hunger and healing. But near the end, she said something I still play back in my head sometimes when the world feels heavy. Sometimes you don't realize you're in a cage until someone else walks out of it. And then you ask yourself, was I ever locked in? Or did I just believe I didn't have the key? It was a chilly Saturday morning when the letter arrived. Not an email. Not a phone call. A real letter. Thick paper, the kind you don't see much anymore. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, looping letters. Inside, the letter was from a lawyer. It said that Eleanor Thompson had left a trust fund. Not for Janice. Not for her estranged son. But for Riverhaven's Unlocked Voices project. The money was substantial. Enough to fund the writing room, buy new typewriters, books, and even pay for guest speakers and workshops. A gift not just for the seniors, but for all whose voices had been locked away by fear, pain, or silence. The day I told Grandma, she smiled that secret smile of hers. Finally, she said. A lock that opens a door. But the true surprise came the day of the memorial reading. The event was held in the garden, under the sycamore tree where fairy lights twinkled. People from all over had come. Families, journalists, volunteers, even strangers who had heard her story on the radio and podcast. Grandma sat on a stage, surrounded by friends. She wasn't just a survivor now. She was a teacher. She read from her final manuscript, a collection of stories from Riverhaven residents. Each story was a thread in the tapestry of resilience. She looked out at the crowd and said, "We all carry locks inside us. Some are chains forged by others. Some are doors we keep closed ourselves. But there is always a key. And sometimes the key is our own voice." After the reading, a young woman approached Grandma. She handed her a small box. Inside was a bronze key, heavy and old-fashioned. On the tag was engraved, "To Eleanor, the woman who taught us to unlock ourselves." Grandma held the key close. Her eyes shimmered. "It's not just a symbol," she said. "It's a promise." In the months that followed, the Unlocked Voices project grew beyond Riverhaven. Other communities started their own storytelling groups. Books were published. A documentary was made. Grandma became a beloved figure in elder advocacy. She showed the world that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. On the last day I saw her, she was sitting by the window, writing as usual. I asked what she was working on. She looked up. "An instruction manual," she said, laughing softly. "For anyone who's ever been locked out." Years passed. The house where Eleanor Thompson had once been starved, ignored, and silenced was now only a shadow in memory, an old, weather-worn building eventually sold and forgotten by its former inhabitants. But Eleanor herself? She became unforgettable. Not because she screamed the loudest or sought revenge with fury, but because she endured, then spoke, then healed. Because she found the courage to turn pain into power and silence into story. After the success of the Unlocked Voices project, Eleanor was invited to speak in community centers, schools, and even at universities. Her presence always stirred something quiet and deep in people, a recognition, a sense of "me too" without anyone needing to say it aloud. She never called herself an activist. Never used grand words. Instead, she called herself something simpler. Just a woman who got tired of being quiet. One day, she received a letter from a girl in a foster home in another state. The girl had read about Eleanor's story in a local magazine. She wrote, "Your voice made me believe mine matters too." Eleanor framed the letter, hung it by her writing desk, right above the old typewriter that had once belonged to her Aunt Margaret. That single letter meant more than any award, news headline, or documentary feature ever could. 'Cause it was proof. Proof that stories didn't just echo, they changed things. In her final years, Eleanor's life was not lavish, but it was full. She gardened. She wrote. She hosted tea circles with other seniors who had once believed their best years were behind them. One day, she helped a woman write about how her own daughter had emotionally abused her for years. That woman published her piece in a national column. Another day, a man wrote about being a war veteran whose trauma was never taken seriously, until he shared his story with Eleanor's help and found a community of others like him. Eleanor didn't save people. She simply handed them the pen and reminded them, "You are allowed to speak, even if they didn't let you before." Her room at Riverhaven slowly filled with letters, books, handwritten pages, and small gifts from strangers. A paper butterfly from a girl in Ukraine. A bundle of dried lavender from a woman in Italy who had been a silent caretaker all her life. Her legacy wasn't in one act of defiance. It was in the quiet waves she made, the hearts she unlocked without ever raising her voice. When Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 92, the entire Riverhaven home went quiet for a moment. Not from sadness, but reverence. They planted a tree for her outside the writing room, a magnolia, soft and strong, and beneath it a plaque. Eleanor Thompson, 1933 to 2025. She found her key. Then she helped others find theirs. Her funeral was attended by people she never met in person, writers, caregivers, students, teachers. Even the nurse who once saw her sneak toast under her pillow came and cried. Her granddaughter, who had once helped her print that very first story, stood up and said, "She didn't just change her life. She changed the way we look at age, at silence, and at strength." My grandma taught us that you're never too old to fight for your voice, and never too broken to use it. The Unlocked Voices Project continues to this day, rebranded in her memory as the Thompson Initiative. There are now over 300 chapters worldwide. Every one of them begins their first meeting the same way, with Eleanor's words printed on the wall. We all carry locks inside us. Some we inherit. Some are forced on us. But every lock has a key. You may not find it today, but if you keep speaking, someone will hand it to you. That's her story. A woman overlooked, underestimated, and nearly erased. Who rose, not with fists or fury, but with truth. A woman whose hunger became a mission, whose silence became a megaphone, and whose final words in her last journal entry were simple, clear, and eternal. Pain made me quiet, but love finally gave me back my voice.